One of the most well-known languages can be spoken by over 1 billion people as of today. With such a dominant footprint on the history of language itself, the question, where did English start, is sure to be asked. Well, the reality is, English wasn't always an independent language as of today. Over the course of many centuries, the development of the English language was based heavily on the diverse concepts of other renowned languages, some of them being German, French, Latin, and Greek. To understand the true history of the English language, we will need to go back many generations and 16 centuries to the year 410 AD. The Roman Empire was crumbling, so in fear of annihilation, the regions England and Saxony traveled to Britain, which was a very small empire at the time. Over the course of the next century, their Roman culture began to fade in turn for a new and original culture. Along with that new culture came the first mention of England and their language, English. However, the language is a lot different from the one we know today. It's called Old English, and it's told to be even more complex than modern English we speak today. For example, there were 3 types of nouns, 7 types of strong verbs, and 3 types of weak verbs. And all of these had different endings for tense like past tense and present tense, mood, etc. In the year 597 AD, St. Augustine traveled to Britain with the goal to convert the region into Christians, but religion wasn't the only thing he influenced. He also introduced some new Latin-based words to the English language, such as church, angel, school, paper, fork, and paradise. The following is a recording of the Lord's Prayer spoken in Old English.
Father ore, thithu art on heavenum, sit in name ye hallowed, to becometh in riche, ye wortheth in willa on earth and swaswa on heavenum. Orne ye de gwamliken rafsilis te dag, and forgiveth our guiltas, swaswa we forgiveth orum guiltendum, and ne ye lead to us unto consnunga, acalisis of ye felle, suthliche.
During the 6th century, the Anglo-Saxon consonant cluster SK changed to SH, so that skilled became shield, and disc became dish. Also, the plurals of certain words became puzzling. The plural of foot became feet, and the plural of goose became geese, but the plural of mouse became mice, and the plural of man became men. Nonetheless, the language still worked for the Anglo-Saxons and surrounding regions. But in the late 8th century, Vikings from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden raided the east coast of Britain and took power over the region. In 1878 AD, Alfred the Great made a treaty between the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings that established the Danelaw, which split the country along a line roughly from London to Chester, giving the Norsemen control over the north and east, and the Anglo-Saxons the south and west. The two countries lived separately for a while, but then began to intertwine with one another. The Vikings spoke Old Norse, an early North Germanic language, so this brought great change to the English language. Some of the 1,000 words they brought to the English language are neck, sister, egg, sky, window, trust, silver, mistake, give and take, and together. The Vikings also influenced some grammatical changes, such as the word changes they, them, and their. Eventually, Alfred the Great came to throne in 871 AD, and he set out rebuilding the nation's education. He believed in fostering the revival of learning, law, and religion. His language of choice was, of course, English. If Alfred the Great didn't believe in learning English over Latin, then there's a large chance that English would be much smaller than it is today. Centuries went by, and the nation of England grew more and more advanced in language and literature. But the evolution of the English language was not near finished. Middle English is primarily the refinement of Old English. Up to this point, England had been used in everyday tasks, and that was enough for most, yet it lacked the refinement that English can have today. Well, in 1066, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invaded the island of Britain and took power over the Anglo-Saxons, much like the Vikings did all those centuries ago. Now the language in power was French. While 95% of England spoke Old English, the 5% who ran the country spoke French and Latin, more refined languages than English at the time. But the Anglo-Saxons adopted some of the foreign words they heard because they sounded better. Some of these words were mason, painter, tailor, and merchant. A few words used in the Old English language for centuries got replaced by French ones. Crime replaced firein, people replaced liod, and beautiful replaced wilitig. Also, fun fact, the word gentleman came from the Germanic word man and the French word gentle. Once again, just like the Old Norse influenced Old English, the French language changed the English language drastically. With the many major changes introduced to the language, it was difficult to learn how to speak them, let alone write them. So a certain monk named Orm made a 19,000-line biblical text in the 12th century named the Ormulum. It became the source of the English language and how to correctly write it. People could look at the book and have a basis of the new Old English language. During the war in 1384, writer John Wycliffe translated the Bible into vernacular English. This translation would become responsible for over 1,000 new words. With all the improvements, English became the official language spoken in Parliament and was taught in every school. Here's a clip of the Lord's Prayer in Middle English.
Our Father, that art in heaveness, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come at all, be thy will done in earth as in heaven. Give to us this day our bread, over other substance, and forgive to us our debtors, as we forgive unto our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Within the 11th and 15th centuries, about 85% of the original Anglo-Saxon words were dismissed, and over 10,000 new words were introduced. This effectively evolved Old English into Middle English. The change to modern English was much more peaceful than that change to Middle English. There wasn't a major invasion or change in power. What changed the language, yet again, was named the Great Vowel Shift. Until then, some words were said differently. Sheep would have been pronounced like shape, me as may, mine as mean, and house as hoose. Some consonants ceased to be pronounced at all, like the B in comb, and the L in half. The Renaissance also introduced many new words: genius, species, militia, radius, apparatus, focus, lens, and many, many more. By the end of the 16th century, English had finally become widely accepted as a language of learning, equal if not superior to the classical languages. Over the next 150 years, up to 20,000 books were printed, ranging from mythical tales and popular stories to poems, devotional pieces, and grammars. Work made in the printing press became the standard in literature for many, just as the Ormulum did. Everyone could relate to the words seen in the press. In 1611, the King James Bible was finally made after 2 centuries of efforts. The first English newspaper was the Courant, or Weekly News, published in Amsterdam in 1622, and the first professional newspaper of public record was the London Gazette, which began publishing in 1665. All of the above gave way to the golden age of literature, which took over England by storm. People such as Edmund Spenser, John Donne, Andrew Marvell, Alexander Pope, and many others rose to the challenge to create masterpieces using the English dialect. And with them came many new words like animate, describe, dedicate, exhaust, modesty, absurdity, communicate, exaggerate, and others. But if there was one person who changed the English language forever, it was, of course, William Shakespeare. Shakespeare took the freedom and flexibility of the English language and turned it on its side. He was one of the first to use the verbification of nouns, in which he picked a noun and used it as a verb should be used. It out-Herods Herod, dogged them at the heels, and Lord Angelo dukes it well. It's said that 1 in 10 of Shakespeare's words written were of his own invention. In the end of his career, we are told that he introduced close to 34,000 words and ways to use words. Barefaced, critical, leapfrog, monumental, majestic, gnarled, homicide, brittle, radiance, dwindle, countless, submerged.
Vast bump, cranny, assassination, courtship, eyeballs, hot-blooded, laughable, dislocate, accommodation, eventful, excellent, fretful, fragrance, gust, hint, hurry, lonely, summit, pendant, and gloomy. He also introduced many phrases used today. One fell swoop, vanish into thin air, laughing stock. As luck would have it, it's Greek to me, a tower of strength, with bated breath, cold comfort, and cruel only to be kind. The changes in the English language throughout the 18th and 19th centuries aren't very major. The most changes are just words made for the many inventions from the Industrial Revolution and digital age. Electricity, the telegraph, the telephone, the phonograph, the sewing machine, the computer, etc. Even with the major changes in the English language, the amount of people who spoke the language was only a mere 5 or 7 million. This number would increase by an outstanding 5,000% in the next few hundred years as the Industrial Revolution and technical age connected the world so much. 80% of the increase would be from outside of Britain. At this point, the advancements made to the English language were drowned out by the countless achievements in other areas. In fact, the biggest changes to the language could have been very recent, with radios, games, vlogs, blogs, podcasts, commentaries, etc. It's possible that major changes are occurring right now even as you watch this. But maybe later in the future we will look back on today and sum up the countless changes into a short and simple paragraph, because frankly that's probably what we've been doing the entire time.